I'd like to point out a mistake I made this year. So this looks like cutworm damage because that's been chopped on the top. But some of these, you can see they pushed up, but they had to fight so hard to get through the crusty soil because I didn't have my irrigation set up and I wasn't watering as regularly as I should have. I was relying on the rain. And so what it does is it basically, they'll push up and it destroys the head of the bean, the green beans, as they push up through the crusty soil. It tears off the two leaves that they start with, these two guys here, and so you just get these little sticks coming up, and it's called snakehead or something like that. And some of them are able to recover, some of them are not. But that's a big reason why there's so many holes in my green beans this year. There's probably 90-95% of the plants were taken out before they had a shot. So like you can see there, that's the snakehead. So it tried pushing up through the dirt. This hard, crusty soil. And it's hard for a little tiny plant to do that. Some of them luckily have had enough energy that even though they lost the first two leaves, which are usually what gives them their start, they're starting to push up some new leaves anyway. So at least some of them were able to recover. And we've got, you know, 2 more rows of green beans that were planted earlier, so those ones are great. But got to be really careful when you're planting seeds to make sure that the soil is soft for them to be able to come up properly. Otherwise you end up with a whole lot of this. It might survive, it might not. It's hard to say. But with a little time and a little fertilizer, looks like enough of them are recovering. We should still get a good crop of green beans. Like this is a perfect example of snakehead. So it just knocked everything off the top as it was pushing through the baked soil. This is another mistake that I made. So these thistles, these California thistles, when I was pulling them up initially, I would just yank them out like that and toss them aside, just figuring, you know, the sun would kill the plant. But what actually happens with this particular weed is that the roots go down, shoot, easily 2-3 feet, and they can go a lot deeper if they want to. But what they do is they go down about 8 inches or so, and then there's a corkscrew in the root. So when you pull it up, it breaks the root at that corkscrew. See how those are broken off? So that corkscrew, that deep root remains in there, and that shoots up a new plant because it still has all that energy down in the root. And then these, with the root attached, these roots also have their own energy. They'll shoot roots further down and they'll restart these plants. So by popping it out and tossing it aside, I turned one weed into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8. They just kept multiplying like that. So that's why down by the pea beds, it's just nothing but straight thistles. So now that the peas have grown in, you can see where there are a bunch of gaps. How thin this trellis is, how thin that space is, this side of this one, and then over here, just these giant gaps here. It's from the blackbirds who normally hang out in that apple tree. And normally they'll hang out on the power line up here whenever I'm in this corner of the garden and squawk at me, because these are their peas as far as they're concerned. But basically, as I was planting the peas, they'd come along behind me whenever I'd leave and pick the peas out of the ground. So this end of the pea trellises, this corner especially, they hit pretty hard. But the blackbirds have also done a really good job of keeping the hawks away from the chickens. Whenever the hawks show up, the blackbirds just swarm them and drive them off, drive them to the ground, harass them, just get them out of here. So I figure they've earned their meal. Next year I'll probably protect the peas in the ground a little better though, maybe lay something over it until they get a chance to germinate. That way I don't end up with sad empty spaces like this. Then I'll give the blackbirds a little treat, some birdseed or something, because they do a good job. But like this trellis, you can see they didn't really mess with, so it's thick, nice and super thick. And if you look at the peas, you can just see hundreds of pods everywhere, all the way down. But the peas aren't quite ready yet. They're starting to swell up. But they'll get probably 2-3 times that size before they're actually fully ready. They taste good just like this.